Take a look at what you're doing this week in our final week of class. This week we are covering patterns in species diversity. We'll take a look at some of the global patterns we see in species diversity, what is driving some of those patterns, what are some of the threats to species diversity, and why is that important. In addition, it's asking you to draw some comparisons between what we see in global species diversity and what we might see at the microbiome level. These are your learning materials for the week and the weekly lecture, and I've also summarized some of the concepts from these in the concept video lectures that are optional to you. One of the first things it's asking you to do this week for assignments is to complete an evaluation of the course. Your next assignment is looking at species diversity and microbial biogeography. So going back and looking over some of the learning materials, what you'll find is several articles and resources there that describe to you what we mean by a microbiome and also how that might be similar and or different from the more global biodiversity patterns that we see. So do we expect to see the same type of biodiversity patterns in microbiome that we do in macrobiome? First, it's asking you to describe and think about biodiversity, and then in part B, it's asking you to apply some of those concepts to the human microbiome. So you have a link here called the Wired Atlas of the Human Microbiome. So it's asking you to go and visit this site and look around the site a little bit. And then after you've been able to do that and you've thought about what biodiversity means at the microbiome level, then you can write this reflection, this paragraph. And make sure when you're writing your paragraph that you're specifically addressing some of the questions here. How does microbial diversity change in the first 15 months of life? What kinds of things do you think influence that change? Why is microbial diversity important to our health? Give a couple of examples. What do you think your personal microbiome looks like? Do you think it's more or less diverse than perhaps someone else's? And explain some factors that you think are contributing to that. Part C of this assignment refers back to this paper that you'll read. The link is here. And the paper will go over some major macroecological trends that we see. So sort of these global patterns in diversity. This has typically been applied to the more macrobiota that we see. And so you'll see that we have these basic rules. Bergman's rule, Rappaport's latitudinal diversity gradients, the theory of island biogeography, and species area relationships. These are things that have been discussed for quite some time, looking at outside of the realm of the microbiome. Now it wants you to first describe each one of those things, and then it wants you to think about what does that mean in terms of the microbiome. Do you think those rules would still apply to the microbiome and justify that? So why might they be different? Why might they be similar? Give some reasonings of that. And this is addressed in this link. So when you go to this link and you read through this paper, you'll see as we scroll down, it will start talking about those rules. So it talks about Bergman's rules, it talks about Rappaport. So it talks about each one of these things, and it tells you what it means traditionally, and then we can explore what that might mean in terms of the microbiome. As always, make sure you take a look at the grading rubric at the end to make sure you're putting everything in there. Your next assignment for this week is going to be a discussion posting where you will post and then reply. And what you're going to do here is you're going to compose a letter to Congress. And before you write your letter to Congress, you're going to go to this diversity of life, the story map, and you're going to look around that to give you some information that you can put into your letter. So go take a look at this site, explore it a little bit, and then you're going to put together this letter to Congress. And you want to make sure in your letter you include these things. So you, of course, want to introduce yourself, you want to describe global patterns, and then you also want to talk about threats to these patterns with background reasoning and evidence. Why should we be concerned about biodiversity, and why a loss of biodiversity could be harmful to humans? So that'll be your initial post. And then in your responses to two other students, you're going to pretend to be one of these congressmen or women who have received this letter, and now you are replying back. And so when you do that, you want to put forth some tangible ideas, achievable goals that could be worked on. So take a look at specifically what it's asking you to do from this perspective when you reply back to those other students. And remember, for discussions, if you want to see the grading rubric, you click on these 3 little dots, show rubric, and you can see the different point value for each of those things here. So make sure that you take a look at that rubric. And then your last assignment for this week is to go back and make corrections and really beef up your posters that you've been working on all semester. So if you have any typographical errors, you need to put pictures in, you need to reformat something, you need to put your references in, make sure you go back and look at all of those. And please go back and look at the original project description. And for each one of those posters, make sure you look at exactly what it was asking for. You may have not lost a lot of points on the draft if you were missing a few things, but here you want to make sure that all of those things are included. So please go back and double check every one of those posters and what it should include. You're going to take those posters and you're going to put them into a file that you will post here. So we're going to have 4 posters in this Dropbox. And then under the Dropbox, you have your grading rubric. In addition to looking at this, please go back and reread the project descriptions on each one of those. And then the last thing is just your checklist. So if you have any questions, about comments that were made on your poster that you're not sure exactly what to do, please let me know.